If there is one word that seems to be all over the place, like it's part of the air that we are breathing right now, it's change. We've got changing technology, changing buyer behaviors, changing tariffs, changing government regulations. Just about every day, something around us changes. And that means that as marketers, we've got to change too. If we keep doing what we've always done while the world around
Mhm.
us is evolving, we become irrelevant and ineffective. But changing what we do and how we do it is not as easy as just swapping out our heels for flats or putting on a hoodie when it gets cold outside. Change management at work is a skill. And not only that, it is a hard won, critically important skill. So, this week's episode is all about change management, a must have modern marketing capability that needs to be on everybody's resume. So, to help us understand what it is, why it matters, and how to master it, we are joined by the amazing and insightful Elizabeth Venter-Botha. She has been through many, many transformative changes, both as a leader herself and as a coach, helping other leaders navigate these murky waters. And we are very lucky to have her with us today. So let's get going. Welcome to the Agile Marketing Edge, the first podcast dedicated to turning Agile theory into real-world marketing breakthroughs. I'm Andrea Fryrear, CEO of AgileSherpas, and your guide on this climb to smarter, faster, outcome-driven marketing. Every week, we unpack the what, who, and how behind Agile marketing, from building high-velocity workflows and slashing waste to measuring what really matters and scaling success across teams. You'll hear quick hit strategies you can deploy today, plus candid stories from marketers who have traded chaos for clarity and never looked back. Hit follow wherever you listen, and let's carve the next switchback together. Thank you for being here, Elizabeth. Can you maybe kick us off by telling our listeners just a little bit about you and your background and why you're excited to talk about change management today?
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Indra, for that warm welcome. This topic really excites me, and I feel it's incredibly pertinent in our modern world. So, a little bit about myself. I've been involved in transformative change initiatives for around 2 decades, either on a local level in my country or in other countries, cross regionally or even globally. I design the change strategy, I get the buy in, get teams and people ready, and then I see it through implementation. I'm a career marketer, but I've had the privilege of working across different functions and different departments. And I've also spent 6 years in tech to really see how the other half live. So that's given me great insight into various areas of the business. And I've seen firsthand how different industries or organizations um, behave around change. And I also understand that an organization is a connected ecosystem. So I'm usually the person that you go to if you want to do something new or something difficult. So starting up a function or a department. My biggest change initiative was for its global user experience across 132 countries. And we worked through $30 million successfully in about 9 months to stand this up. So for Agile transformation, I cut my teeth in 2017, and I was leading a large scale transformation across every single department of a luxury automotive brand. So I've been successful at change and also learned through mistakes, which is incredibly valuable.
That's great. So I can't wait to dig in because it sounds like you've seen some good and you've seen some maybe not so good. So we've got a lot to learn from you. So let's get started. I want to just maybe level set first about what change management actually is, because we talk about on this show a lot of terms that get thrown around and people think they know what they mean and they don't really. So maybe just share from your perspective, what does
Mm.
change management mean to you? and then maybe give us a comparison of what's it look like when it's going well
Yeah.
and what does it look like when it's done maybe not so well.
Yeah, that's a really good place to start. So, if you look at a textbook definition of change management, it really describes a very structured way to guide people, the people side of change. I see it as preparing, equipping, and supporting individuals, teams, and leaders for change. It's often associated with the adoption of technology, but really it spans systems, processes, strategies, and different transformations. Now, your question about when it's done well, it helps to minimize resistance to change and it aims to manage the disruption that a large initiative can bring into an organization. So, in good practice, our change management process evolves and that approach evolves. We iterate on it and we facilitate change in a way that becomes a consistent practice in the organization, not just a one and done. So when done poorly, it's really a checkbox exercise. There's one and done activities and it plays out in a linear way. Now, anybody today would know that change is not linear and so is transformation, right? So it's almost seen as a project that runs alongside a change initiative and it has a clear start and then boom, it has a clear stop. But as I mentioned, that's just not the nature of change.
That's really helpful to think about it that way. So, can you give us an example of something concrete,
Hmm.
like a good practice that would fall under this done well category versus a bad practice? Something really like specific that
Yeah.
you've seen somebody do that really made a difference in a good way and a bad way.
Yeah, very good point. So, oh my goodness, yes, I've seen it done well. Sometimes I've done it well, or I've seen it not done so well. So, a checkbox activity would be sending out just beautiful communication to announce the change, and that's kind of where it stops, right? But an activity that's real that could minimize resistance could be pulling, before you embark on the change pulling managers or employees into different workshops or sessions for them to build and design the transformation or the change. Because it's very difficult to resist something if you've built it and you feel you have ownership in it. So that's a very good practice. Another activity that could help minimize resistance is looking and delivering small, tangible wins first. It could be fixing a broken workflow, simplifying an approval process. So, with one of our financial services clients, we were right up front to simplify and fast track approvals with legal and compliance, which was such a pain point. And we did that through conversations on both sides. That brought relief to teams immediately and was like oh, so this could work for me moment. But, another checkbox type of activity would be we have a large scale rollout plan and there's no real feedback loops to show what the progress is or what the actual tangible improvements are.
Right. So we have this beautiful slide deck, and then
Mm,
there's just sort of nothing really behind it. Yeah. Those are very
yeah,
different like
yeah,
feelings as well. It feels to how it would feel to have this kind of done to you versus having a say and a role in
yeah,
how it's happening.
yeah. Every time that change is introduced and it turns out to be a done to you scenario, I've seen it flatten out. There's a little bit of excitement in the beginning, and then the real pain starts to show. Then it's very difficult to pull it back.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, as you mentioned when you were telling us a bit about your background, this is something you've been involved with for a really long time. And right now, it seems like change is faster and deeper and
Mm,
more disruptive
yeah,
lately. But do you see change management as kind of an evergreen capability that organizations have always needed and are always going to need? Or do you think there really is like a higher demand, a higher need for it right now? Or is that just a perception that we might have because things are just so kind of frothy and intense right now?
mm. Yeah. So things, to your point, are really frothy. It's like we're in rolling change all the time. So that mode is really, it's something that we live, like lived reality. So do I believe that facilitating change is evergreen and increasingly needed? Yeah, absolutely. But we really need to change the way that we see change management. So your really popular models often imply that project-based approach that I spoke about earlier. Um, so there's this clear beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end, and then everything just stabilizes, and there's a return to some new level of normal. But now in our environment, it's constant disruptive change. So we work in an era of continuous evolution instead of occasional big transformations like maybe 20 years ago. So the whole notion of managing change as a temporary project or initiative is outdated. Instead, the capability to facilitate and adapt to change should be deeply embedded into the core competencies and capabilities of every leader. So that's a real shift. So it's no longer just a task that we can delegate to a change management manager or a specialist, but it's really an aspect of modern adaptive leadership. And some things that it could mean in practice, right? So open and transparent communication is the norm. It's not just the stuff that you do in the beginning, but you're always communicating like that. Leading with empathy and openly discussing employees' fears about change. So some active listening, and it's not only the listening that's important, but really getting to the root cause of the fears that could help people shift in the change. So something else that's incredibly valuable is the agile mindset. And I know both of us are real fans of that. So being open to experimentation, open to feedback, there's curiosity and there's innovation. It could help employees really work with change and not against it. So ideally, you want to shift the goal from simply implementing specific change to building a culture that's resilient in the face of change. And what works incredibly well is empowered teams, a continuous learning, and then adaptation. So you have a real edge when you've integrated some of the principles of change management into your culture. So this change resilience becomes really an intrinsic capability in people and in the teams that helps you and helps your teams with this rapidly evolving environment. So just the last bit of touching on the last bit of your question. Um, we're all aware, I mean, absolutely every day, of how AI is introducing such a rapid change. It's shifting change. And you think you've got accustomed to something, boom, there's something new. So it's really not done with us. This is our current and our future. So with teams being able to facilitate sweeping change or rolling change is incredibly important right now.
Yeah, I love everything that you said there. I just want to underscore two things. One is that this needs to be not an isolated skill or capability. This
Mm,
isn't something
yeah.
that we just kind of wall off and say this is a problem for somebody, one or two people in the organization to deal with, but
Mm,
this is something every leader needs to have as a core competency now because change is going to be continuous. But then also the kind of the stories we tell ourselves about change and how we think about it.
mm,
We have an episode back, which we'll link to in the show notes. One of our earlier episodes where we talked about change and how you think about it and what the stories that you and your team tell each other about change are. Is this an opportunity or is this a
mm,
scary
yeah.
thing? Like that's going to influence how everybody approaches it. So really connected to everything that you're saying.
Mm,
All right. So far we've been thinking about change as a general topic, but let's zoom into more of the specific topics of our podcast, which of course is marketing. So let's talk about marketing teams in particular, because you and I spend a lot of our time working with those
Yeah.
groups specifically. And I do feel like we love them. We love our marketing teams so very
Hmm.
dearly, but they do tend to have some special kinds of resistance to change. Where do
Yeah.
you think that's coming from? Like, why are marketers often struggling so much with change?
I think there can be multiple reasons why it's so difficult for marketing teams. So, I don't know, first tell a story. So, recently I was speaking to a manager and she was explaining for the Agile team how she'd protected them from using a new digital tool that would really save them time and effort. And she was quite proud of it. So, another team is using it with a lot of success and they said, "Hey, wouldn't you be interested in this?" So, she brought it to her team and had a demo and showed them how it really could help them. The team is just cold. So she didn't challenge them. She didn't challenge the mindset. She didn't say, "Hey, what if we just try it a little bit, right?" To help just a little bit of curiosity in a shift. Uh, and she did admit to me that the team is really change resistant, and that she felt that she needed to protect them the whole time from change. So when we looked a little bit deeper, um, the team members really felt that if they resist change, they can resist it away. So as long as they keep saying no to anything, the manager will always cave in. So not addressing resistance with marketing teams can really leave them stuck in their ways. And the world that we are in is a brave new one. So not helping individuals and teams move forward means that we are actively holding them back. And it's so interesting because I find so often in marketing that executives, directors, or managers hold people back. So if an area, it's sometimes, it can be creative, it can be digital, anything that has their way of working and they feel very strongly about it and change needs to come along, very often it's the managers or executives that resist it. And then members of their departments feel that they've got to be loyal to the manager. So they resisted. And maybe they weren't intending to do it, but now I've got to really do what somebody tells me to do, or take on the way that they perceive change. Now, as a career marketer, um, I will say this about marketers. So sometimes we can see ourselves a little bit as mavericks and have a air of just don't tell me what to do. I know stuff. Okay. So I've seen also in marketing teams that they can be such a focus on being a superstar, so really high achievers, but it really comes to the cost of the greater team. And modern ways of working and modern environment really need teams to work together and to be really cross-functional, and that word collaboration to be part and parcel of the team. So we can be a bit closed off to our own blind spots. So we drink our own marketing Kool-Aid and think that the experience that we've built up, or what we know right now about marketing and our way of working, is just good enough, right? So we're lacking marketing maturity because we're not necessarily embracing new ideas, technology, ways of working. So we become stuck. So resisting tech, maybe tech and marketing is like this, or trends, right? It can have really a very um, limiting hold on us. So marketing stagnates. It becomes copy and paste. You're not experimenting. So we don't really know what's working, what's not working. And sometimes teams even bulk at using data to make decisions or inform their campaigns because I know what to do. So I've done it in this way. It really works. Well, I don't really know if it really works, but I'm just used to it and this is easy. So a little bit of self assessment and a willingness to change your own beliefs. Um, that can help us push forward and be more mature in marketing, and not really putting ourselves and our department at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also a feeling of overwhelm a lot of times,
Mm,
right? That
yeah.
we just have so much to do. Like, how could we possibly take on change in addition to
Hmm.
everything else? It kind of ends up with this perfect storm of resistance. And so I'm wondering, as you're coming into a team, right, when you're being brought in to help with change management of any sort, uh, what are things that clue you in, maybe some early warning signs that you might be in for a bit of a battle, that you might be encountering some change resistance?
Yeah. So there's definitely some early warning signs. What I will caveat is sometimes it creeps up on you and it just whacks you. Um, but some of the early warning signs that we're going to struggle is, well, they can be open verbal pushback, right? And you know up front, okay, this is going to be hard. You're hearing things like the leaders don't get it, they won't let us. That really signals some blame or deflection, or we've already tried this, we've done it this way, or better, oh, so is this the new flavor of the month? Okay, there's going to be a tough road ahead. Some tells are a little bit more subtle. It's the tone, it's subtle behavior and small contradictions between what people are saying and what people are doing. So I was on this large scale transformation with a fintech company during COVID. And we really believed we were tracking in the right direction. The teams showed active support and positive results. Um, the managers seemed to be on board from the beginning, but about 18 months into it, we were like, oh my word. Um, Maybe what we thought is active support is maybe not there. So as the teams became more self-sufficient and self-organizing, the managers started feeling very relevant, and teams and employees became a little bit more, uh, a little less controlled. So the managers no longer felt that they owned employees, owned things. So that is such a strategic opportunity actually for a manager to say, how can I be more strategic, right? If you're so focused on command and control, you can miss that opportunity completely. So their resistance really showed up as quite contradiction. They were saying that their goals were aligned with transformation, but their actions and latter very active behaviors indicated the opposite. So above the surface, they were saying, yeah, sure. Below the surface, they were saying, hell no. So they started blaming Agile or Agile transformation for all kinds of problems that existed even before Agile walked in the door. Now, team members reporting to them, as I said before, um, they were choosing to follow their managers, so they showed a very disinterested, unengaged, or passive. So they were attending the events, but they weren't really there. They weren't really engaging. Um, so it cost the organization so much. That low morale, the sluggish execution, it meant that there were missed deadlines that really impacted their business partners and their customers. So it took a little bit of that to pop up to turn the tide and say, hey, let's all be part of this. Let's all row in the same direction. Unfortunately.
Wow, I love the that uh quietness there. Like,
Hmm.
you expect people to fight you, but sometimes they're not coming out and
Yeah.
fighting. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really interesting. Um
Yeah.
and and right.
Honestly, Andrea, I would prefer people fighting me openly than doing nothing, right? And I go a month down the line and it's like, oh my word, the wheels have come off.
Mhm. Yeah, it's easier to deal with things out in the open, but when you can't see it happening, yeah, it's harder.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier kind of things, people referring to a change as the flavor of the month, and it
Mm.
being just another thing that's coming along, another change that's maybe they're being asked to go through. So when that's happening, is it to you a sign of maybe change fatigue? And is that especially now, right? People are feeling maybe that teams are under-resourced, people might be on the verge of burnout, and
Yeah.
leaders might be trying to maybe balance this sense of we have to change. We don't have any choice but to evolve and adapt our ways of
Mm,
working. But we also need to give our teams the time and space they need to work through fear and uncertainty and all the
mm,
emotions that come with change. How do you help teams and leaders walk that line, like balance that
yeah.
patience and that sense of urgency when going through these kinds
Yeah.
of changes?
I mean, you're touching on a good point about change being so emotional for people. And sometimes they don't even understand why they're resisting it. They don't see necessarily the underlying fears that are sitting there. Now, for managers and leaders, to your point, balancing urgency and patience, it's really an art of modern change leadership. So you want to move fast enough to keep momentum, but you also need to be slow enough for people to come along with you. So urgency without empathy really burns people out. Or patience without progress erodes trust. So such a fine line to actually walk. When we talk about change fatigue, yeah, I do see that. And through my experience, generally we associate it with too much change too fast and too often. But I think there's more to it. So I see it as change without meaning. There's also then too little time for recovery in between the waves of change. That really takes a deep toll on people. So patience really grows when people can see that their efforts have meaning and it matters, um, and how it contributes to the organization or to the customers, right? Or even to the team well-being. That way people can release some of their fears and feel more meaning and less burnout. As a leader, if you decide to pick up the pace, you want to move faster and you want your teams to deliver at pace, you have to remove friction and constraints for them. That really helps them to feel that they can move forward. So, in this, capacity management can really be a strategic act. So, there's some agile practices that we know that work for that, right? So, work in progress limits, to an earlier point, streamlining approvals and really reducing rework can help. Also, to help minimize some burnout and some, oh gosh, this is just more on top of my plate. My mantra these days is the work you don't choose to do is as important as the work that you choose to do. So you really need to reconnect people to purpose. Um, I was at a conference a couple of months ago, and one of the keynote speakers said that the most effective way to drive change or to ask people to engage with change is to speak to their highest values. So talk about integrity, talk about openness, talk about connectedness, curiosity, and fairness. That helps people to connect meaning to this change that they're introducing. So it's not all just about the work, right? It's also about how we show up. So if you're a leader and you're facing this, some of the really good questions that you can ask is, what's most important to you about the way that we work? What could success look like to you in a way that feels aligned with your values? That's a very different way of speaking to people than this is what we must do. This is what the organization wants. This is what the CEO wants. So knowing what people value could go a long way in shaping your change approach.
That's really amazing. I love that. And so you're talking about, right, change is this ongoing
Mm,
thing in organizations. Now it's not over, it's a continuous process
yeah.
that we're going to have to manage. And so it's going to come in these waves, right? But we don't want backsliding as well, and we have to give people some room to breathe in between the waves. So then let's talk quickly about how leaders can fully integrate sort of the last wave of change
Mm.
before we introduce the next one, avoid the backsliding and kind of the loss of momentum. Let everybody internalize that and let those new ways of working maybe solidify before we move on to the next one. Let everyone catch their breath. What are some practical things that people, especially leaders, might want to have in mind in sort of that after the
Mm.
first wave of real excitement and momentum, right? And we're kind of moving into stabilizing and normalizing things. What needs to happen in that phase?
Yeah. Such a good point. So it really speaks to the stickiness of change. Um, when we treat change like a project and we focus just, hey, we need to do this, we need to adopt this thing, but we don't rewire the culture. So it's very easy to backslide. So the rewiring the culture is a little bit of that slow down and that checking in, right, that you're talking about. That's so important for, before the next wave starts. So it really speaks also to the pace of change that we're introducing, that momentum, if we go too fast, if we go too slow. But people do need a little bit of slack in the system. So practical ways to do it go a little bit back for me to taking things off people's plates, making sure that work is easier for them and it's easier to facilitate it. So when I think about that, I think about the iceberg metaphor about all the events and the practices and the stuff and people checking Kanban boards. It's all this stuff at the top of the iceberg. But where change really happens is the piece underneath the iceberg, right? How they think, what they value, and what they practice that embeds change. So spending time at the bottom piece, that could mean spending time speaking to individuals, managers speaking to individuals working together on certain initiatives, or certain opportunities and deciding how they're going to tackle it in a little bit of downtime could help stimulate the good stuff at the bottom and really help with embedding a mindset that's different. Right? Now, we are the masters of stickiness as marketers, and I sometimes think that we can take our own way of developing campaigns and messaging to heart. So even in the life cycle of a campaign, you have a little bit of ebbs and flows. So sometimes taking a little bit of time to stand still. I don't know if that's exactly, but to go a little bit slower before you speed up. Give it a little bit of slack in the system, maybe holding off on certain initiatives could help people to become a little bit more change resistant. Well, no, sorry, not change resistant, change resilient.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the metaphor of the campaign. We don't always go 100 miles an hour toward every
No.
campaign, right? Some of them are at different levels of focus at different times, and same thing with change. Yeah, I really like that
Mm,
as a good metaphor. All right, so big focus for every episode here is leaving people with something really practical and tangible that they can go home and start working on. So
mm,
if some of our listeners are thinking about maybe the last quarter of this year or looking forward into maybe even next year, thinking about a big change initiative, maybe we've got an AI rollout coming, or maybe they're thinking about changing ways of working and adopting Agile or something else entirely. Any strong advice
mm.
that you would leave them with if they are staring down a big transformation of some kind?
Yeah. So get ready for building resilience if you want to embark on something that's really transformative, right? You've got to have some staying power, and we talk about this grit or growing hair on your teeth. So it's just a little way that we talk about it in South Africa. Um, so the first thing that I'll say is make sure that you can see it through. And if you want to use a change model, right, adapt it to make sure that you're changing in a way that's really adaptable for your organization. First thing, right, to do is to build some clarity before you start the actual launch party for whatever change you want to introduce. So make sure that there's a purpose. Start with honest conversations about why change is needed, but also get input from people about how they want to see the change taking place. So that co-creation or design that I was speaking about earlier. Now, that takes time and it takes effort. And that's why a lot of leaders and organizations skip that and go straight to this is what we need to do. And this is what our roadmap, the rollout plan actually looks like, right? Also make sure that people have support along the way. Who can they talk to? Where can they give their feedback? If they're experiencing a little bit of panic about, say, an AI change that's coming in, where do they go to find some support? Um, People follow meaning instead of roadmaps. So that co-creation, it's the best form of change management that money can buy. So make sure that you know what people value up front and then shape it to make sure that you are speaking to their values and that they can connect. Right. And then number three, I'd say design for sustainability, but think about it up front. How are you going to sustain the change? Now, your first like 3 months are so exciting. There's the t-shirts, there's the balloons, there's all the communication, all the stuff. But 9 months later, you're going to need discipline in the system. So if you're in agile transformation, for instance, got to make sure that you say stabilize the rhythm up front. Okay. Um, Look at change, running change in uh, smaller cycles instead of big bang. Choose a pilot way and really give a little bit of a break after that, I'll say, so that you can communicate out the value and you can communicate why this worked. Or, hey, what did we learn that wasn't that great? This is what we can do going forward because we need this change. So open communication, feedback cycles, right? Communicating the wins early and often, and then taking some time for reflection. That is what helps change to be sustainable. So those are the things that I would highlight for anybody that's going to embark on change at any time. Do some pre-work. Make sure that people feel part of it, all layers, right? Especially managers, they can co-create and that they can craft and design. That way, you building something that could last instead of being ripped out 6, 9, 10 months later.
Absolutely. And we didn't plan this, but actually, next week's episode is all about pilots. And so, as you're preparing for your
Mm,
pilot, you can listen to next week's episode, which is going to be all about how pilots are supposed to work and what happens when you don't set them up properly. So, you can tune in next week.
mm.
And Elizabeth, this was so helpful and so insightful. Thank you so much for your time. This has been so great. Really appreciate you joining us this week.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure. This is such a topic that I'm passionate about. Um, And, I really want to say that change can make you incredibly resilient. Harness it, use the opportunity to learn new things, and you'll become accustomed to change, and it won't be so scary anymore. So, thank you for listening to me.
And then it's like a superpower. Change is like a superpower once you
Yeah,
achieve that
for
level of
sure.
resilience. Yeah. And so, if you are feeling like you need some support in tackling some of the really thorny problems that Elizabeth was articulating today, the Agile Sherpas team, of course, is here to help
Hmm.
you. And I should mention that Elizabeth is a member of that team. So, if you want the opportunity to work with her, you can reach out to us here at Agile Sherpas. And she and the rest of our team of amazing Sherpas, we coach marketing teams and leaders and executives as they try and evolve their behaviors to align with the modern agile ways of working and go through these processes of change management. We are here to help. So you can drop us a line at agileSherpas.com/coaching-contact, and we'll see how we can help. Till next time,
Mm.
I am your host, Andrea Fryrear. Don't forget, the struggle is real. So is agile marketing.